Hello, and welcome to another episode of the SKB Law Podcast. And we have a treat for you today. Now, if you know the kind of work we do, you'll know that we do all things around family law. Most of the stuff we do is around divorce, and we try to look at things in a holistic manner, meaning whilst we can help you with the legal fixes, there's often other things that are going on in your life that you need help and support with. And we're not blind to that, because obviously if we can help you address those issues, then it helps us fix the legal issues. So we have a wonderful person to speak with today. I have only recently met her, so I'm just as interested to find out about her as I hope you are. And so without further ado, I'll introduce to you our divorce coach, Feryial Parvez, and she'll tell you more about what a divorce coach actually does. So, hi, Feryial. Thank you for joining us today. So you are a certified divorce coach, correct? So tell me a little bit more about what a certified divorce coach actually does and at what part of the process of a divorce you get involved.
Thank you so much for having me on today, Sarah. I really appreciate it. And I'm so glad that there's a platform here that I can actually let people know that there's so much more support out there for people going through divorce that they don't realize. So I just want to give you a quick background on why I became a certified divorce coach. About a couple of years back, my sister called me and told me she was in a very abusive, toxic relationship. And she was hiding it from the family because she was embarrassed and she was hoping things would get better. But unfortunately it didn't. She found herself walking on eggshells constantly. But from that phone call that she made to the moment we signed the divorce papers, and I say we because I saw firsthand what she went through when she went through this divorce. And I had an epiphany. I said, it doesn't matter. Like, you could have the best family support, the best friends, and the best lawyer, but no one was looking at her emotional side. You know, everyone wanted her to be in the business of divorce because that's what we need to make the decisions. We need the financial aspect, the legal aspect. And, you know, she just had to now sit there and become a robot. And there was no space to validate her feelings, even though we thought we were giving her the space. We're not professionals and we couldn't give her that. And then many people say, oh, well, maybe your sister should have had a therapist. Well, we had a therapist, but the therapist was more interested in what happened to you as a child and, you know, what made you pick this person as a partner. Let's go into that. That doesn't help anybody going through divorce. And our lawyer, she was spectacular. She was full of empathy, someone very much like you yourself. But you know, my sister was looking for validation from her and almost therapy. And our lawyer would say, listen, I'm not a therapist. I can't help you that way. I can help you within the realm of the law, but the other stuff, you're going to have to just get through it. And I just felt so sad for her because even though she had all the support, she was struggling. So I just don't want anyone to ever go through what she went through. And after the divorce was finalized, I discovered certified divorce coaching. And I said, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help ensure that people have all the tools to have a smooth divorce process and come out stronger and better. You know, Sarah, I think the other problem is divorce is so negative that people going through it are just already kind of in this negativity zone and it's projected. So it keeps people in a limbo, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, I sort of heard a little bit about your story, you know, when I previously spoke to you, but to hear it again is just so powerful that out of a need, out of a desire to help those in need, you've now basically carved a career out of trying to help others, you know, now that your sister has sort of resolved the situation. I think my question to you, and just to help some of the listeners, you spoke about your sister wanting to validate her feelings, okay? And a therapist wasn't cutting it. And you're quite right. Not only is a therapist what sometimes regresses individuals into like, let's go back to the beginning. What happened? Something must have happened to you at school to cause, you know, it's just you know, I don't mean to be tongue in cheek, but, you know, those are the kind of issues to look at. Whereas, you know, people going through divorce, like you said, need their feelings validated, their anger, their upset, their betrayal, you know, the feelings that they haven't even processed them, because often, for all, when we get a call from a client and I've said this so many times before, my lawyers, my team are often the first port of call. They're often the first person they've actually said it out loud to, and to hear it on the call when they're saying it sends them into, it just triggers them, and it sends them into this spiral of, all kind of whirlwind of emotions. And whilst my team and, we've built our practice around the empathy aspect to make sure that we are in touch with this client's feelings, whether it's anger, whether it's upset, whether it's sadness, to not disregard those feelings, but at least, get what we need to help them navigate the legal process, right? That's essentially our job. And like you say, we're not therapists. We might be the most empathetic people in the world, but there's a limit to what we can do. And I have often spoken to individuals, like I say, we at SKB Law look at things in a holistic manner, therapist, divorce coach, other kind of support networks, mental health support, doctor support. But when we mention things like the word therapist, and I've done, 3 podcasts with a brilliant therapist called Aisha, for the same reason, to highlight the work she does, I often get clients, just pushing back a little bit, thinking, well, there's nothing wrong with my mental health. I don't need a therapy session. It's still got a taboo attached to it. Whereas you are in a completely different kettle of fish, in one that divorce coach is a little bit unknown. But, I went into a long speech there to ask you a simple question, is that what can a divorce coach do to validate a person's feelings that is different to what a therapist does?
That's a great question. Like I always say a divorce coach is like part strategist, part your emotional anchor, right? So I help you navigate the emotional aspect, but I also keep you on track. So almost consider me as your divorce project manager. I'll give you a very simple example that I see a lot of times with clients. And I don't want to generalize, but mostly some of the clients I deal with are women who are faced with divorce, have decided to leave a toxic marriage, and all of a sudden are faced sitting in front of a lawyer. And as a lawyer, you need certain information, that certain information being financial. A lot of these women didn't have control of their finances, and they feel so traumatized. So, like, how am I going to answer this question? I was told I wasn't smart enough to handle the finances, and now I have to be part of that discussion. So what I would do in that case is I would, talk to them and validate, like, listen, a marriage is a partnership. Your role was to help build your family, take care of your children, take care of the house. Don't put yourself down if you didn't have that knowledge. And it's never too late. Let's gain that knowledge together right now. And, I'll break that big task into smaller tasks and make them realize they actually are aware of much more than they realize. And just sitting down and having that conversation can be extremely empowering. And they have this almost, I see it all the time, this epiphany, like, actually, wait a minute, I am actually running a whole household. I actually know what I'm doing. I can do this. And I'm just there to help them realize a lot of things that they already know. And if they don't, I ensure they get the tools to learn those new aspects of their life.
Yeah, that's perfect, honestly, because whatever you have said, honestly, Feryial, I have seen it in action. And just today, for example, I had a client who, the first time she came to see me, textbook that you said, I wasn't allowed control of any finances. I was given a budget. My cards were controlled, didn't know where expenses were in and out. And it's pretty much kept that way, even if she wanted to get involved. And so when the separation came, husband upgraded to a younger model, the whole, shebang, she was just cast adrift, and she was dealing with the whole, out of 20 odd years, I've just been cut loose. Now I've got to manage the finances. I've been given a small budget that I'm told I have to manage on. And I don't know I haven't got a clue where to start. I don't know what accounts we have, nothing. So we did some work with her, Feryial, and of course we will, because, we want to help her with the legal aspects. But she, by the second and third meeting, you could see a new confidence coming through to her. And it was really lovely for my team to see that. We see it a lot, but every time it happens, we still are like, she's a different woman, because they regain that control. But if these tools, these mechanisms that you as a divorce coach can teach them, and this leads me to my next question, is at what stage of the process do you get involved? If someone is even just thinking about it, I mean, often they don't have a choice, it's imposed upon them. But if they're in that situation where they're thinking about it, can you assist them at that point? Or is it just when it becomes official?
I actually can assist on all stages of divorce. So whether you're contemplating, you're going through it, and what I see is people need that help after the divorce papers are signed, because at that point, all the experts are gone and you're held with this now piece of paper that says you're divorced, but you still have to deal with your toxic ex. Maybe you still have kids, you know. So I help in all three stages. And I just want to say, Sarah, that as a divorce coach, I'm not pro divorce, I'm pro clarity. And the more clarity I can bring to you, the better decisions you'll make.
Yeah.
For whatever path you take.
Yeah, that's a very important point, because often us who work in this space are tainted with that brush that, you are pro separation, pro, feminism and all of this. In fact, I had we do a lot of social media stuff, and I had a social media video where I was correcting an imam who was giving misinformation out about religious divorce. And one of the comments in there was, oh, I bet she's single. Oh, I bet she's pro-divorce. And we get that all the time. But like we are pro-fairness. So we don't sit there and say, yeah, go for it, honey. Go for divorce. Oh, what do you mean? He didn't buy your favorite cake on your birthday. That's it. Get him divorced. When there's children involved in these situations, and we say this time and time again, that our work impacts these families for a lifetime. We're not just like a transactional property lawyer that, you buy a house, you sell a house, you transfer a property. However we deal and manage with a person's situation during this process, they will carry that for the rest. And if they have any children, they will carry that impact for the rest of their lives. So we have to be, it's a great privilege to do what you and I do. It's a great privilege for people to allow us into the most private, most sensitive part of their life's journey in some cases. So, we have to treat that with high regard, that we are being allowed in that process. So yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because we do get that pointed to us a lot.
Me too.
And we deal, I'm sure you do, but we deal equally with men going through the divorce process as we do with women, as with husbands, as with wives. So it's not specific to any gender. And
No.
Tell me a little bit about, what's the split of clients? Do you get more women who are requesting this kind of support?
So funny enough, initially when I first started this out, I just thought that I would be able to, because of my sister's experience, relate to women easily, more easily.
Yeah.
But I actually have, I would say it's a 30 to 70% split. So 30% men and 70% women.
So
I actually have currently two male clients.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting. So I do also want to put that out there, that it's not just women who are the victims. There's also men out there. And what I've also seen through my dealings with clients is that sometimes they don't have big problems. They're just not communicating properly. And the biggest problem I see is people are scared to talk about finances. And rather than actually be open and honest, they avoid these conversations, and these escalate, which turns into resentment, which then keeps going, and unfortunately can end in divorce.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct on that, in that we have an equal split of clients who are male and female. Even though we are a female-led team, so you'd thought maybe male clients would feel we want somebody relatable, who we can open up to. But I am sensing a shift change. I've been doing this work for a long time, and I'm sensing a change in that. A lot of men are becoming more open about their feelings, becoming more open about the emotions that they're going through. Early on in my career, I did see like men thought it was taboo to talk about what they were going through, how separation and divorce impacted them. That was the first thing. So we're seeing a shift change where men are being more open about what they're going through. We're seeing a shift change in husbands and men who are going through separation who are open to support and help. So we're seeing, we work with therapists as well. And in terms of their mental health, they will actually ask if we can signpost them to anyone that can help in that space. So it's an area where I think you're getting, it doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter who the client is. They are asking for the support, and the support is out there. And that was the purpose of this podcast, really, because I think you're a growing sort of area in terms of more and more divorce coaches are appearing on social media, on the internet. You can see that more and more people are supporting people through divorce. But honestly, up until recently, Feryial, there wasn't that many of you around. It wasn't seen as a thing that was needed, or even that it was, that it was around. In terms of your certification, what have you seen that change in terms of what I'm trying to say? And I hope David cuts a lot of this out because I'm bumbling here. What I'm trying to say is that as a divorce coach, has there always been a certification process? Has that always been a thing? Was there ever a time when people just said, hey, I'm a divorce coach because I'm empathetic, I'm strategic, and I can help? Is this a recent thing
I think
that certification has come in?
I'm so glad you actually brought this up, because in the UK, actually, there is no regulation. Anyone can be a coach.
Is that correct?
So
Right.
tomorrow, if you want to be a coach, you
Mm.
can be a coach. Now, from the perspective where I'm coming from, because of what my sister went through, I would not want anyone to go impart knowledge or advice that isn't equipped to, right?
Yeah.
Divorce is so, it alters your whole life, and it affects your finances, your children, your mental health. So, it's very scary. And I'm surprised that it's still not regulated here. So when I was looking to become a divorce coach, my number one priority was that I had the proper training, the proper frameworks. And it's not just based on my opinion, that, I'm coming from a credible source, that I'm also held accountable, and there's a strong code of ethics. And I have to continue my education every year to keep my license.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important when you do go need help, you should always look for professionals who are certified or licensed in their fields. Like, again, would you ever go and speak to a lawyer that is, not allowed to practice or hasn't finished their education? So it's the same thing. And I think it's great. And then there's another aspect to it. You will see a lot of divorce people who proclaim to be coaches because they went through their own divorce. And look, divorce is unique to everybody, and everyone has a story to tell. And you can learn so much from sharing stories, right? But at the same time, what I think I bring to the table is that I'm happily married. I'll be celebrating my 21st anniversary this year. So thank you. So I bring a different perspective to divorce. Sometimes you have to be straight with your clients and say, well, maybe do you think you're creating a bigger issue here, or do you think this might have led to this? And I think that's really important when you have someone who's coaching you through divorce, is to be real with you. Sugarcoating something and just saying, being a yes person doesn't help anyone. So
yeah, honestly, I think as a lawyer, it's a breath of fresh air to hear you say that, because honestly, often clients do need a reality check. And that's not in a demeaning way at all. I think,
no.
Sometimes they get hyped, and it's all, you might have heard this yourself, but it's often, well, my friend got a divorce and this is what they got. My friend had a divorce and this is what they did. And it's always, you're comparing apples with pears there. Like you said, everybody is unique in terms of their issues, a situation, and how they manage all of that. So I suppose what you're saying is that the service you're offering is like a bespoke support with strategic touch points along the way, depending on which part of the process you're at. With like I said, with an added reality check, and the voice of reason, I suppose. As lawyers, it doesn't always sit or land well, should I say, never mind sit well, it doesn't land well if we are trying to gain the trust of that client to advise them correctly, okay? Because that's the bottom line for me, that the advice I give them has to be right for them. depending on their circumstances and depending on their case in particular. And if I'm often having to then do that kind of reality check, which I'm not shy of doing, but that you tread a fine line and maybe losing a bit of the trust of that client. Whereas if they have someone like you supporting them, and we can give them sort of the legal options and say why one would fit best for them, they can go back to you as a sounding board and not somebody whose cousin, uncle's brother's daughter went through the same thing and having a WhatsApp or a Instagram conversation with her saying, what do you think? So
That's exactly what happens a lot of the times, unfortunately.
yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought that up because, a lot of times people just say, don't talk about their actual divorce, either because they're embarrassed, they didn't get as much as they thought, or so you don't know if people are telling the truth. People hide a lot of the story.
Yeah.
How many times do you hear about anyone going through divorce? You only hear about it once they've actually signed the divorce papers. And all you hear was like, oh, it was really expensive, or I didn't get what I wanted. And that's the end of the discussion. No one talks about the challenges. I personally think if someone is going through a divorce, they should actually seek out a divorce coach first and get like almost, this is what you have to do. This is what you have to be prepared. So I then make my client more credible when they're sitting in front of their professionals, like their lawyer, their solicitor, and they ask the questions that they need to ask in a very effective way, which also reduces their whole cost overall of the divorce.
Yeah, I was going to agree with you there, because often a lot of time is spent in getting to the right space themselves before they can then start making informed decisions. Whereas if they've already sorted that out with yourself, then it's going to be more cost effective, right? So my next question to you, well, I have many questions, but the next one is, in terms of strategy and managing the situation they're in, the support you give, it's often a cause of concern to me when someone's going through this kind of situation. Of course, it's about them. Of course, it's about what they're going through and how they manage all of that, and out of the process come out with a fair settlement. But often a worrying factor for me is the impact upon the whole divorce process on them and their relationships that they have with their mainly children, but it could be siblings, it could be parents, it could even be new partners, right? Because you often find a situation where separation took place a while back and they found a new partner, and because they want to then make things official with that new partner, they need to resolve the previous relationship, and get everything signed off, as it were. So first of all, do you see that a lot? And are you able to help someone who may think they've got a handle on things and think, yeah, I'm sure I know what I'm doing. I know what I want. I've got a good lawyer and I know how to deal with it. But then there's residual feelings that they will absorb. And then this impacts upon any children. I had a client yesterday say to me, "Oh, my kids are fine, they're absolutely fine. They're not impacted by the separation." But I'm seeing a different picture in front of me, and the behaviors that she's reporting back, that are being manifested by the children. Can you help with that side of things too?
I think that's where people need most of my help, actually, is that ignoring that emotional aspect of it and going into the business of divorce, it's very dangerous. And what happens is people are just rushing to sign the divorce papers, thinking, once I've signed these divorce papers, everything will just fall into place. But that's not the reality. So what happens is you've signed these divorce papers, you haven't really processed anything, you haven't maybe made the decisions properly because you didn't get the proper information to make the right decision that's best for you. You end up with a lot of divorce remorse. And I see this with a lot of people. I'm coining it now.
I love that. Divorce remorse.
Yeah, it's because people have just rushed through it. And then they're like, oh no, oh my God, wait, my lawyer's not here. And I still have to deal with this toxic ex who's deciding to change a custody agreement almost weekly. So the number one thing I teach clients is that we need to talk about how you're feeling. Why is this making you feel this way? And how do you want to be remembered 6 months down the road, 12 months down the road, 18 months down the road, and how you dealt with the situation? And more importantly, if there are kids, they should be your priority, not being vengeful with your ex, right? That doesn't help anybody. So I really, my number one goal is to make sure the kids are a primary focus. Number two, that you're being emotionally validated, taking the time to understand why you're feeling these things, not to be reactive, but to be strategic. And I teach people you need to have boundaries. You need to have boundaries with relatives who want to impart unnecessary knowledge and information, and friends. And so boundaries are very important. And I help you practice how to set those boundaries up as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic, because you've brought me nicely onto the next bit of the question, which was, you are a rarity, I think, as far as I'm aware, being a South Asian divorce coach. And often one of the complaints I have from clients who we try to signpost to various professionals is that they just don't get me. They're from a background that's not similar to my own. They don't understand the nuances in terms of our intergenerational living, in terms of, when we say this a lot in our podcast, but when you divorce someone in our culture, you divorce the whole khandan, you divorce the whole family. And the dynamics around that, I'm sure it happens in a lot of other communities, but it's to the South Asian community is very, very peculiar to that, community. So I've got lots of questions about this. I don't know where to start with this one, but in terms of intergenerational living and living with in-laws and extended family, how do you even start supporting someone who's in that kind of situation?
Well, it's exactly what you said. A lot of these clients that I'm dealing with are South Asian, and some are not. But the South Asian clients that I deal with, if they're dealing with lawyers per se, let's say, or mediators, or anyone in that legal aspect, they just don't understand our cultural background. So they might take something that is very regular in our culture and make it into something negative, and make it a bigger deal than it should be. And they just don't know how to navigate it. And that has a huge impact on the client, right? So I always tell my clients, you have to remember why you want to leave this marriage. There must be a reason. And in our culture, unfortunately, being happy is not normalized. What do you mean? True. You're not happy? You're married. Well, you have kids. Who do you think you are that you can just get divorced? But, and that's a trigger point. That's what keeps people in marriages, because of that guilt of like,
very true, very true.
Why do you have to be happy? But I ask people, like, if you're not happy, how can you be your best self? And how can you be a best parent and, the best in anything you do? So I think in our society, in our community, the whole aspect of validating yourself and that I'm not happy, I deserve better, is always an issue that comes up. So I always remind my clients, like, don't you think you would be a better parent if you were happy? And I always tell people, you do not need two perfect parents. You need one good parent. And you can be that parent for your children.
Yeah, absolutely true. And in terms of this whole, do you see a shift change? Because when I first started practicing, exactly what you said was very, very common, in that, particularly with, women who are in unhappy marriages from the South Asian community, it was seen as a luxury to be happy or do your own thing. You were primarily the caregiver to the children, the husband, and maybe the extended family. So to be able to make that, decision that, no, my happiness is important. Are you seeing a shift change over the years of people who are prioritizing and actioning that priority?
I do see a big shift, especially in younger South Asian women who know their worth, and but unfortunately, just because they have that belief, it's not really fitting into, the foundation of our communities. I'll give you a very simple example. Boy, girl meet in university. Oh, wow, we're both let's say Pakistani, oh, this is going to be great. We're going to go back to our parents and tell them. They get married, while your boyfriend, girlfriend, everything is amazing. Now the reality of you getting married, and now the reality of the greater family being involved in your daily life. That maybe the mother of the bride or the girl's mother is very interfering, needs to know how much the husband is making. Oh, why don't you drive a BMW? Why don't you you don't do enough vacations? Or vice versa, your daughter, my daughter-in-law, all she does is work. She doesn't even care about my son. Poor guy, he's starving.
Yeah.
She
I
thinks
hear
she's
that so
smarter than
much.
him. So then I ask the question, whose responsibility is that? Is it the responsibility of these in-laws, or is it the responsibility of the partners? Are you communicating like, this hurts me, this bothers me? We got together, we had the same idea of how we want to live our life, and now you seem to be siding with your mother on how I should be as a wife or a husband. So these dynamics in our community are very tricky. But I think, again, communication is the key. Education is the key.
Yeah.
I see it all the time in the Indian Pakistani communities. We are educating our girls. If you look at universities right now and the population versus girls and boys, I think the majority are women now.
Yeah.
And I think 40% are men and 60% are women. Now, let's go to the 60% of women. A lot of those women are South Asians because, everyone needs to be educated. Everyone needs to be degreed up because you'll be more easier to get married off, right? It's a more presentable case. Like, oh, my daughter's a doctor. But then we don't let these kids actually live life. We just want them to get married and then maybe not even continue in that career path. So what are we teaching our young kids? We're telling them, okay, you need to get educated so you can get married. But then we don't really want you to do much. That causes a lot of breakdown in relationships. We're not teaching our kids, what do we want in a partner? What does married life look to us? And how do I get there? And what do I have to be to make sure I have a partner that's equally fair to me?
Sure.
I think we have to do a lot of education in our community.
Absolutely. Honestly, that answer has taken me perfectly to my last question, which is, as a divorce coach and everything that you've seen, and you've touched upon the fact that communication is a big issue, the cultural trends are still very much, or the cultural dynamics are still very much steeped, in the South Asian community. What as a divorce coach, what work needs to be done, or what conversations need to be had, or, as you've just mentioned, what education needs to be put out there prior to entering into marriage? Where is it? What more work can be done to try and make, and this is just one in the eye for those who are looking at you and I and say, oh yeah, they're pro-divorce, these guys, and we're like, we're not.
Yeah.
So we're going to end on a positive to say, look, from our experiences, we want to feed that back out to say, to make sure that you have solid foundations for a successful marriage. Through your work, Feryial, what have you learned? What are the top 3 things that you think couples thinking about going into marriage should be talking about or considering?
The number one thing I tell young couples getting into marriages, and this is just me being an auntie and saying, "Beta,"
We're all aunties post 25.
Yeah, I can't believe exactly. So I always tell young kids, like, it's lovely to have that Bollywood love story and it's beautiful, and I hope everyone has that. But you need to talk about reality. What does marriage look like for you or your partner? What are your expectations from, both of it? Are you guys willing to compromise? What are your non-negotiables? How religious are you versus how religious you're not? Because when you're in love, that new love, you'll do so much for each other, right? But once you're married, those things go out. And talk about finances. Do you have debt? Are you responsible for supporting your family? Are you responsible for maybe helping out to pay for other siblings' weddings or other siblings' education? Because these things are never touched upon, especially in our community, because these are, things that, let's say the elder brother has responsibility towards. But if this information is not asked, it could create a lot of issues during the marriage.
Full disclosure, basically.
Full disclosure.
Yeah. Okay. So I lied when I said that was my last question, because I've got another one. And this is
Sure.
just a bit of a random one, but there might be
Yeah.
someone out there listening to this video and says, "Oh, this sounds great," but does Feryial deal with all kinds of marriages? And the reason I mention that is because a lot of our work we'll deal with the legal civil marriage. Obviously, for us, it's under the law of England and Wales. Do you ever have any clients that come to you who are separating in relation to religious marriages?
Yes. Yes. I see different scenarios all the time. So I'll give you an example of a client in Canada who is from a multi-faith in a multi-faith religion. So there's a lot of complications there, but they're not married. They've been living common law.
Okay.
So there's a whole other aspect. And then I have a client who's very religious, and her church keeps trying to tell her not to get divorced because it's against God's wishes. So that's a very interesting person that I have to help as well.
Yeah.
So when I started this off, because being South Asian, because of seeing my sister's experience, I thought, okay, this is something that's really just in our communities, but you'll be surprised how divorce is so negative in so many, like in the Catholic religion, based on what my client is telling me right now.
Yeah.
We have a great breakthrough session, and then she goes to Bible studies on Sundays, and her support group and her church group tell her that she's doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Her husband needs help, and her divorcing him is going to be the worst thing for them.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting line of work where I'm at. I'm learning so much, and I'm realizing that we're all emotional. And when it comes to love, no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how many degrees you have,
the blinkers.
if you're,
Come on.
yeah, you just can't make the right decision sometimes. And that same thing happens when you're getting divorced. It's so emotionally overbearing that it's hard to sometimes see what's actually in front of you and what you have to do. So having someone to be there by your side can change the whole game.
No, that's fantastic. Particularly it's very, very interesting what you're saying about the religious marriages, because that you will have to bring forth a whole different type of coping strategies and, navigation of that kind of field. That's not just finances, that's religion, that's culture.
And religion is very personal, right? So you have to be very
absolutely.
careful. You can't, it's a very delicate walk, as you could say.
Absolutely. So, Feryial, tell us finally some information about how, first of all, how this works, because people might think because of your Canadian accent, you're based in Canada. Can this be done virtually? Where are you based? And how does anyone get in touch with you if they need you?
Okay, perfect. Well, I am actually certified to practice in the UK, Canada, and the US. And I do most of my sessions via Zoom. So you can just contact me. And I have my website, which is www.empoweredtorenew.com. And you can also look me up on Instagram and just direct message me. I offer a free 20-minute discovery session. Perfect. In which I can basically walk you through what I do, and then we can decide if it works for you or not. And then we take it from there.
Perfect. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you today. I'm really excited to learn even more about what it is that you do and to hear the success stories of what you do. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of the day. And hopefully we'll speak again soon.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed myself today, and I hope we can keep having more podcasts together.
Definitely. That is a dead set. I'm sure there is a lot more we can speak about.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Yes.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
So thank you for joining us today. Absolutely brilliant podcast with Feryial. If you want to hear more from her, let us know or contact her directly. If you want more information about divorce and the process and the support networks available, contact us on info@skblawfirm.co.uk, or you can get onto our website at www.skblawfirm.co.uk. See you next time.